And we're live. Welcome to Don't Be Coy. I'm your host, Unkle Lew, and today I have the honor, pleasure, and the utmost appreciation to have with me today Elliott Liebling. Elliott, thank you for being on the show, sir. How are you doing this afternoon?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, sounds good. How's your week been going, man?
Busy as always, but nice and sunny outside today, so I'm gonna try to make the most of that.
I totally understand. So, for the people at home, man, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I currently live in Jersey City, New Jersey. Born and raised in New Jersey. I've spent some time up in New England, which is how we met, as you'll recall. Did my undergrad and a master's in public health up at Brown University, and then came back down here to continue my career.
Yeah, no, that sounds good, man. I really appreciate you like saying that in such a brief fashion, but it's like I think that just goes to highlight what I'm about to say as far as you're just one of the most grounded and consistent individuals that I know. Like you're very humble in like your approaches to things cuz it's like yeah, I went to Brown and got my MPH and just came back home and just been chilling. But that's not how it worked out, man. You're definitely a very goal oriented and driven person. Like, you completed your MPH in like 5 years, and typically it's like a 2 year program. So it's like you spent some of your undergrad years taking those graduate level courses, and so it's just like you took that rigorous activity and then excelled in that, and then now you're still in your like mid late 20s and you're a director over a research firm and stuff, and you're successfully publishing data and things of that nature. So it's just like I think it's funny how you just say it so passively, but no, man, you're definitely doing the dang thing.
Well, thank you for going a little bit more in depth. It's a very gracious introduction, but yeah, that's exactly right. I've always had this passion for public health and for New Jersey in particular, which has always drawn me back here. My family still lives here. But yeah, going into school at Brown, I didn't really have the language to express or understand what I was interested in. A lot of us just default to, okay, I want to help people. I'm interested in healthcare more broadly. I'm going to be a doctor. And then, discovering through my time at Brown what that meant in terms of public health and community health, and being able to, like you're saying, wrap a master's into that was a really amazing opportunity for me.
Yeah. One of the things that I really want to like touch on today is just like how you've been so good at balancing life while working towards your goals. Like I mentioned beforehand, you're one of the most grounded individuals I know, and like you just said, you wanted to help people and being from New Jersey, so it's like your family still being here. Like, what's your secret for having such a successful integrated life? Like, how did you get to this point to where you say like, yeah, this is what I want to do, and this is just how you get it?
Yeah, it's such a good question. The sad part is that I feel like there probably is no secret, right? You want to be able to say, oh, this is the one key to work-life balance, but it takes a lot of hard work. It takes being intentional every step of the way. So, for example, I am super lucky to have found a career that I'm passionate about and be surrounded by people who support me, like my girlfriend, who I'm sure we'll talk more about, and people like you. But really, it just requires a lot of decision making along the way, right? What's a priority to me and what's not? Like I mentioned, I'm passionate about bringing healthcare to people who are traditionally underserved by our systems, and making sure that people's social determinants of health is not meaning that they are spending less time on this earth. So when I'm working long days or putting in hard work to get a degree, it feels a lot less like work, which certainly helps. But beyond that, right? Yeah, there are certainly sacrifices that we all have to make, whether it's prioritizing work over family or family over work. But it's certainly never easy. So I'm excited to talk a lot more about it.
Yeah, man. No, for sure. I think like there there is a growth in like the balancing, right? And like in order to get to that point, you have to, as you mentioned, make those sacrifices. But first, you have to identify like what are the priorities for you, and like what is it that you want to truly focus on. So like in if you can reflect a little bit on like that first moment when you had to make that decision on a sacrifice, like what was that like for you, and like how did you get through that?
Yeah, so I think when I think through all of this, I have to acknowledge that I come from a place of certainly privilege in terms of my family background and economic background, and also the opportunities that I've been afforded, whether that's going to Brown and having access to amazing professors and classmates or whatever else. So decisions that may be higher stakes for someone else are potentially lower stakes for me, right? I can commit to 5 years in school and prioritize that and not have to worry about supporting my family back home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's potentially easier for me than it is for others, is the first piece that I want to acknowledge. But I also think that it's a time in my life, and you mentioned this, I just turned 28 last week, but it's a time in my life where I feel like I can sort of grind, right? A lot of my coworkers are a little bit older. They have family, kids, whatever it might be, and I'm not quite there yet. So I can prioritize work in a way that others might not want to or be able to. So I do set some boundaries, right? There are certain non-negotiables that I have in terms of work-life balance. I have a dog that I love to spend time with, and I'm walking her every morning. That's a non-negotiable. But I'm available at hours into the evening that a lot of other people might not be, and it's a decision that I made that works for me. But I actually respect everyone else who's made the opposite decision a lot more. It takes so much courage to be able to say that I'm interested in the work, but it's not my life, and some of us do make it our lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that that's an important distinction too, man. Like realizing that you dedicate so much of your life towards getting to this particular goal, right? Like regardless if you're like an athlete or like a professional in corporate world, or just like even an artist, like you give so much of your time to getting to learning the skills, learning the systems, learning the trade. And then once you get to the point where you're actually a practitioner and doing the work, it's hard to separate like, how you can not necessarily, I remember a phrase you used to say, like, you work out to eat, not necessarily eat to work out, or whatever it was. And it's kind of like that same type of principle. It's like you're working to live and provide sustenance for your life, but at the same time, there's more about you that makes you who you are. And recognizing like who that is, and recognizing all of those particular facets that make you the individual you are, but then also setting the boundaries around what those realize. So I think there's a lot of complex systems that go into there, right? And understanding all of those different facets while also working towards that goal, right? You're not just doing these things as a way to just get by. You have a why that you're focused towards.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the things that my dad told me early on that really stuck with me is that some people work to live, other people live to work, right? And I think we all, to some extent, work to live, right? We need a paycheck to survive, and I'd love to be in a spot where that's not the case. But I'm fortunate to have found this career path and job in particular that is mission-driven and goal-driven, and in my mind helps people. So it's not just a 9 to 5 that I need to turn off at the end of the day. It's actually something that I'm passionate about and feel like I'm able to make a difference. So it's a lot easier to put in that effort when you can translate that directly to impacting people's lives.
Yeah. And man, I think you mentioned earlier as far as your like acknowledging like the privilege of that you come from. And I think that even myself, I can acknowledge the privileges that I've had growing up as well. But I still think that there is that cornerstone that you and I both have in common around having jobs that are mission oriented and aligning that with our why, that allows us to be able to put in those long hours or dedicate that time. And so, like, do you think, or what's your perspective of like one making taking the risk and making that sacrifice to go towards what their why is, as opposed to just doing something because um, they have a mission they need to complete? Goal oriented versus mission oriented, I guess, is the difference.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you and I both have sort of lucked into a position where we're able to pursue both, right? Our mission and our goals, our career goals, right? Being something that you could probably achieve in any field, right? You could
Mm-hmm.
go into consulting, you could go into research, you could go into medicine and pursue your goals to move up in the world and have an impact on as many people as possible. But the mission is so important to me. And so to give some background to your listeners, when I first got to Brown, I was interested primarily in infectious disease and did a lot of work with HIV, including in global health, particularly in Africa. And I, through that work, was able to connect with a professor. I took his infectious disease epidemiology class. His name is Brandon Marshall. And we were able to connect on that level. And I actually was able to join his research team to complete my undergrad thesis and then continue that work into my master's. And he had done some work in Vancouver aligned with HIV, but in the context of injection drug use. And at that time, we were in Rhode Island, which was really feeling the brunt of the overdose crisis. And he had become a real subject matter expert, both in Rhode Island and in the world, right, in Canada and the US and beyond, on substance use more generally and its impact on infectious disease. So I was able to develop my expertise in substance use, in opioid use in particular, alongside my research skills. And the connection between HIV and drug use has always been really compelling to me. They're both these intersections of health and healthcare and race and politics, right? Whether it's the drug war or the way that HIV really wasn't spoken about at all in the 80s to now, where it overwhelmingly affects Black men and women, gay Black men. So it just gave me an opportunity to look at these health issues through this broader societal lens and work with people who are made vulnerable by the structures that we put in place. So being able to orient my work around these ideas and focus on something that's so timely, affects so many people, but also so complex in the way that it includes all of these different factors, I think helps me just really wake up and go to work every day and be excited about it because there's a mission behind it, right? For some people that I work with, if you're a data analyst, for example, you might not care what the numbers represent, right? You could be in the oncology department, you could be in the substance use department, it doesn't really matter. But for me, there's so much more behind those numbers or those words that really helps drive the mission.
Yeah, man. I think that what you just did there is lay out the sauce. So I want to repeat back what I heard you say. So, like, initially, whenever you were talking about whenever you were in your early years at undergrad and in graduate school, you had an intentionality around like what that passion was towards like infectious diseases. So you knew that at a young age, or just even you recognized at that age, that this is something that I don't like, and this is something that I want to address. And so you saw your passion towards it, and so you sought towards mentors that could teach you around learning it. And to your point, like the point of privilege is, it's like, yeah, you were at Brown, and this particular individual was doing research not only on the subject, but also getting that firsthand data as well. And like getting primary data is, like something that's rare, but not only getting the data, but also presenting it and teaching. So I think like from a mentor perspective, it's like you had a rock star, but a rock star can look like anything in any area, right? Like even if you said, let's, for example, I want to be a mechanic. So whatever kind of passion that an individual can have towards cars or towards any kind of automotive vehicle, going to a space and finding a mentor that can do that and has that same type of drive to where you want to get to, and learning how to learning from that individual, and like not just a mentor that shows you what they do, but also invests in sponsors into you. Like you mentioned, you got to join his team. And then from there, leveraging the skills that you got from your mentors to go towards whatever mission work you want to do, right? Like for the mechanic example, to say, hey, now that I have these skill sets, I can open up my own shop and be an entrepreneur, or I can work my way up in the corporate ladder as a technician or what have you. But you have those skill sets that you can begin to leverage and make those kind of choices within your life because you initially had that passion and you took that first step to fall into what you wanted to do. And I'm sure you had to take some sacrifices, right? Like going and having the opportunity and having that positive light to say, yeah, I wanted to learn from this individual. That means that that's taking away from whatever social component that you wanted to do, or what other that other thing that it could have been. And it could have been just sleep. And so now you have taken those sacrifices and you see the benefits of it. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting the piece that you said about mentorship, because for me, it points to the importance of having multiple mentors, right? I had a professor as a mentor who helped me develop my subject matter expertise and my research skills and understand how to navigate academia and write papers and submit papers and give presentations. But at the end of the day, he took a very different career path than I ever imagined myself taking. And that's not where I saw myself. So I also have mentors like you, for example, right? It was a couple years ahead of me in the whole process, taking similar courses, but having very different career goals. And I think most of our classmates and our professors, right? A lot of people end up in academia and medicine and research. And you and I have this shared interest in hospital or healthcare administration. So seeing someone pursuing that path really helped me understand how I could do the same, right? You worked at Rhode Hospital Association, moved on to large hospitals and healthcare systems. Being able to see that actually in action was a whole different experience and mentorship, but just as valuable.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. Like you got to surround yourself with the right kind of team, right? Like you can't. It's good to have a diverse group of friends, but it's also beneficial to see like have someone that has that same type of drive as you. It's like you all might not necessarily be shooting for the same goal, but y'all all are going at the same pace. And it's that having the right pacers and then noticing like some people might be ahead of the game, right? And say, this pacer is up 2 minutes ahead of me or behind me. Let me go and speed up so I can be up to them. And I think that that's a very good thing to acknowledge too, man. So like one question that I have is like, now that you kind of have the recipe down as far as what you need to do in balancing, but how do you still grow in your work life balance? Because it's not necessarily one of those things that are fluid. Well, it's not stagnant. It's fluid in the sense of that there are all different kind of life circumstances that can come in any moment in time, right? And balancing in the good and then also balancing in the not necessarily positive time. And like balancing the good and remembering to like celebrate those wins, but then also being present when and being there when things aren't necessarily the best in your life. And I'm curious from your perspective, like how do you approach that balancing and like growing in that balancing sense?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think there's a lot in there too. The one piece to stick on the mentorship idea is that now, as I continue in my career, I have the opportunity to be a mentor rather than a mentee, and it requires a lot of active thought in a way I never quite could have imagined. Right, when I was an intern, I was always so frustrated. Why is there not enough work for me? Right, why am I sitting in this cubicle all summer doing nothing? But being on the other side of that, it requires a lot of intentionality and effort to understand what's meaningful for that intern, for that mentee, whatever it is, right? So I try to take time to pause and reflect. If it's an employee, a mentee who I have a relationship with, what does this person need from me? How can I provide it to them? And what I don't even know what the best way to say that is. What can I do to make sure that their experience is as valuable as possible, right? And that might be something as simple as just blocking out 15 minutes of my day to think actively about that and not be distracted by other things. But it really requires that effort.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, it's just like I I was just thinking about that because yesterday I took my every year I take my interns out for dinner at the end of their internship, and like, you know, sometimes I don't want to do it, but having that intentionality, because I remember reflecting on whenever I was an intern, having that time to meet with my preceptor and just either if I had something to talk with them about or if I didn't, like it provided a lot of growth. And then also having a time to like celebrate where they took time out of their day to just recognize like, hey, you did some good work and I really appreciate you. That meant a lot. And so I try to pass that along as well. And so it's you know, I I think it's funny because it's just like whenever it comes to like celebrating the wins and like balancing that act, it's it sounds like it comes from whenever you want to reflect upon whenever you were in that same position, or what is it something that you would desire always being that person that you wish you had, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly, right? I think you learn as much from the bad mentors as you do from the good ones, right? Learning how not to treat people is just as valuable. But yeah, I can't agree anymore about the importance of celebrating your wins. It's something that I always try to do. And I mentioned my girlfriend earlier. Her name's Rosh, and as you know, she was diagnosed with breast cancer a few years ago, and everything is good now. Scans are clear, but she's really taught me the importance of celebrating every win, no matter how small it is. So whether that looks like a bottle of champagne or a fancy dinner, we make sure to do that at every opportunity as possible. And so I definitely try to keep that tenet in my personal life, and then also have it carry over into work. I think positive feedback, of course, is so crucial, right, in making people feel valued and interested in the work. But I also want to make sure that I personally and my staff are not scared of or harping on mistakes, right? I want to give people the space to fail safely, because that's the only way that they'll really grow, right? If you've ever had a boss who chops your head off after one mistake, it makes you very hesitant to take any risks or be transparent, and that's not the environment that is conducive to success. So
Right.
giving people space to be transparent, be accountable, and learn their lessons from a mistake, no matter how big or how small, and move on from that and grow. I think it's so important, and something that I definitely struggle with. It's just the type of personality that I have, that if I make a mistake, and again, no matter how small or how big, I'll definitely stay on it for longer than I should. And I've always heard that a good quarterback, if they throw an incompletion or they throw an interception, they forget it immediately, right? You have to have short-term memory loss because you got to get right back out there and make the next pass. So something that I'm still learning on. I think I'm probably better at creating that environment for others than I am sticking to it myself. But that's so important.
Yeah. No, I totally get that, man. It's like, you know, whenever I talk about or ask the question around balancing in the bad, like I hear you say like there's two different types. So like there's a mistake, right? Where you, whether it was intentional in the sense of you didn't follow a process, or unintentional in the sense of it was just truly a misunderstanding. It's not necessarily saying like, oh man, you suck at the first time this something happens, but more so of being present and recognizing like, hey, I made this mistake, but getting back on the horse, if you will, as a sort of speech to say, I'm going to charge forward and say, I'm going to do this again. I think that that takes a level of confidence and a level of practice, because making mistakes doesn't feel good, man. You know, it's it's that anxiety that comes from it, but or angst, but fanning the fire, if you will, to the situation is if you harp on it or like make someone feel beneath themselves for any of those kind of things. And I think, you know, that's one way of looking at it as far as just um the bad kind of sense from a mistake, but those same principles kind of can be applied to the bads that aren't mistakes. So just life happening, right? As you mentioned beforehand, and thank you for sharing that as far as with Rosh, with her diagnosis. I think that, you know, that's nothing that could have been controlled. And like, that's one of those circumstances that come with life. But as you mentioned, being present around those circumstances happen, and learning to celebrate the wins, no matter how big or how small, but then also how to keep, not necessarily fighting, but keep moving forward in the sense of saying like, hey, like this is a life situation that I'm facing, but I still need to make sure that I can once again get back on the horse and make not necessarily the best out of the situation, but learn how to navigate this new terrain that I have entered, so that I can grow from this just as if I was growing from a mistake.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way to put it, and it's something that I struggle with a lot. I think as a lot of men do, that I'm very solution focused, and if there's something bad in my life, I want to fix it, and sometimes you just got to sit with it, right, and sit with your feelings and listen to yourself, listen to others, and that is so difficult for me.
I bet so, man. So like, how has that growth process been for you, learning how to like not only sit in your feelings, because you know that's a weird space. Right? Like, who knew that as a human being we would have all of these dang emotions, and learning that there are things that not necessarily appropriate, inappropriate, because these are our thoughts, but learning that how to manage one's emotions and how to recognize when one is feeling anxiety or feeling sad or feeling whatever, and like how to know what box to put that in as soon as possible, but then also realizing how to unpack that box, whether it's through oneself or through the professional help with a counselor, therapist, what have you. I think that that's a very interesting growth process, and I'm curious around how you went about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I think back, I feel like I've always been relatively comfortable with myself. I just didn't really know what that meant, right? I didn't really know who I was, or who I was always changing. And now I've gotten to the point where I'm sure I'll continue to change as I grow older, but for the most part, I'm pretty much set with who I am, right? no longer feel like I'm bouncing around geographically. I'm in a long-term relationship. I have a career in place. So
Have a
being
dog.
able to, yeah, exactly. That's a whole nother level of commitment. But being able to really understand what that means, be comfortable with myself, helps so much, right? When I'm anxious about something, I'm comfortable with something, I'm happy, I am way better at recognizing those patterns and also knowing how I, as a person, need to react to it. So I certainly have my own coping skills, things as simple as going on a walk with the dog, playing some video games, watching basketball, or getting into deeper conversations when necessary. Just seeing that growth in myself, even just in the last couple of years, it's been fun to witness, but yeah, really helpful in terms of emotional intelligence and relationships with others.
Yeah, I wonder, do you think that the pandemic kind of like, I'm always trying to look at what is the glass half full type of approach from it. So like, do you think the pandemic gave us the opportunity to kind of pressure cook that? Like we were for at least a solid year, like I can't say this past year because with quarantinings and all the different restrictions, like people have started doing whatever they want to do. But at least for a solid year, we were in our homes. We were only being around those who were in our close immediate family. We were only going to work and going home. And we had to find new approaches towards living life, really, and finding new ways to handle being to ourselves. So, like, I'm curious around, like, you say the past year or two, like, how do you feel like the pandemic supported some of that growth?
Yeah, I think in my situation, that was definitely the case. In probably mid March 2020, we saw each other for the last time pre-pandemic. It was probably during pandemic at that point, but hindsight is 2020. But then, as things were just starting to shut down, I was living in New Jersey. My girlfriend was living in New York. Said, "Hey, let me swing by and pick you up because New York might be shutting down for a little while." And 2 years later, we're still living together. So in the course of this pandemic, we essentially moved in together, got a dog, got an apartment together here in Jersey City. So it accelerated our timeline quite a bit. Before that, we were essentially long distance. She was always in New Jersey and New York. I was in Providence and Boston, then at the Jersey Shore. So it was still a few hours on the train to get to here in New York. So we've had to really quickly learn how to coexist in the same space, physically and also emotionally, right? We fortunate enough now to have a couple of different rooms that we could go into if we need to, but it's a lot more cramped than it is in a long-term relationship. So knowing how to respect each other's boundaries, know how to communicate with one another is certainly a work in progress, but has been accelerated, hugely by the pandemic.
Yeah, no, man. I think that that's very interesting and very funny because it's like you're you're like, hey, New York seems like it's shutting down. Let me go ahead and scoop you up. We might. There's no telling how long this is gonna last, but like, let me just know. I have a feeling that I'm probably not gonna get to see you a lot if this shuts down. Because I remember even coming to your birthday, man, like because of the pandemic and stuff like that, like the train just took forever. and and even like my airplane ride back, I was scared thinking that I wasn't even supposed to be on this plane because I was pretty much the only person on it, and I was like, I know I'm going to Seattle, right? Like this is kind of eerie, but I
Yeah.
think I think that that's a beautiful thing, though, man. Like, um, you literally over this 2 year span, and there's no telling how long it could have lasted if it wasn't for this pandemic. Um, as far as the amount of growth that you and Rosh has been able to have in your relationship, and like that to be such a forcing function as far as even in yourself, and realizing that, like, you know, you as a person is constantly evolving, but like you're remaining grounded from as far as who you are as an individual, because you still have the same mission, you still have the same priorities, like you still have the same like boundaries that you set, but it's like you've learned to respect things as you're growing. So I'm totally understanding all of this stuff, man, and I really appreciate you breaking it down like that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting when you say about priorities shifting, because we got a dog a couple months into the pandemic, as many people did. And you hear a lot of people say right when they have a kid that their priorities entirely shift. And I'm sure dog is not at all close to that, but I did feel that a little bit, that, my priorities began to shift. There's this other life, and in our house, I think now 3 lives that to some extent I'm responsible for. And yeah, it certainly shifts my priorities away from work towards family, whatever else it is. But yeah, it's so funny looking back at the beginning of the pandemic. It was literally how it went down. It went to go pick her up. We just thought we were going to watch a couple episodes of Tiger King, and here we are watching Tiger King 2.
Oh man, that's beautiful. Well, I really appreciate you taking out the time today, man. And I know that you're a busy person, so I'm just gonna go through these last lightning questions, and I'll let you get back to your day. How does that sound?
Sounds perfect.
All right. What's your favorite relaxation or self-care activity?
A big basketball fan, so I love the Nets. Love them since they were the New Jersey Nets. Stuck with them when they moved to Brooklyn. So I try to watch as many games as I can. I actually just for the first time got NBA League Pass, which I think it's a subscription service that the league offers, so you can watch any game across the country. And you'll love this because we have a long history of watching obscure sports and obscure broadcasts. But the streams actually don't cut to commercial. Instead, they show you the in-arena feed that you would see on the Jumbotron. So you get to watch the T-shirt toss, you get to watch babies crawling across the court. It's awesome.
Oh, man, I definitely need to come visit now. Oh, man, it can't. So I need, before I go to this next one, I was watching an obscure sport the other day. So Australian women's rugby, that's where it's at. Talk about the most contact I've ever seen. It's, I don't know what's better, that or UFC. I don't know what's better. Dual screens. What's your best book recommendation?
You might know this about me, that I'm much better at buying books than I am at actually reading them. It's like a guilty pleasure of mine. The next one up on my list is actually one called Undoing Drugs. It's by a journalist and writer named Maya Salovitz, and it's about the history of harm reduction and addiction. I really respect a lot of her writing. She's written another book in the past that I really enjoyed, so looking forward to cracking that one open.
All right, sounds good. And one person you would like to thank for your journey thus far?
I think it's got to be you. I spoke a little bit to this earlier about how meaningful it was to have you as a mentor, but also as a friend. I don't know if you remember this, but I think we were in a biostats small group together, and we were leaving and taking the elevator downstairs to go out into the snowy Providence weather, and I think you looked down and said, "Hey, we're wearing the same snow boots." And the rest is history.
Yeah, I remember that. I still have those boots, man.
Same here. Tom Brady boots.
Oh, man. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show, man, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks so much for having me.
This has been another episode of Don't Be Coy with Unkle Lew. As always, I'd like to thank this episode's guest for a great conversation, as well as thank you, the listener, for joining in. Whether you're a first-time listener or a regular, I always appreciate your support. If you like today's episode and ever want to listen to more, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. And to join our community and access future bonus content, be sure to visit dbkpodcast.com.